I guess the reason why we sort of put this in the place of 3Ds of operational excellence was actually, and Paul touched on it in terms of the sort of lack of sexiness around that word. Because actually, if we'd have just said this was about operations, that's often the response is a bit like, really? Because most leaders and founders and senior people in creative businesses, whether you're a digital agency or an animation house or whatever it might be, didn't start their business to do that. They started their business to be creative and to make a difference and to drive results and performance and build client relationships and build a sustainable business from a creative standpoint rather than from an actual operations point of view. So we're really, really conscious when we try and sort of put events like this on in terms of how we phrase it and the starting point for the topic, if you like, really, in that respect, and therefore the 3Ds bit. Another way of putting it, and I fundamentally believe this to be true. Fundamentally believe this to be true. Certainly about that really important stuff, and actually some of it, hopefully it won't be boring, but nevertheless some of the stuff that we'll talk about by its application can be, but is really, really fundamentally important if you want to do that bit there around driving success and making a real difference, So you'll see that, that image of that yawning bored baby a few times on the way through tonight, and that's just a reference back to this point around some of this is a bit boring, but boy oh boy is it important. And I think it's the bit where it can really, really make a difference. What I often find, like Paul says, I work a lot in the agency space and I consult and advise, whatever that means, but nevertheless I work with lots and lots of different agencies. And it's really true to say that on the whole, the new business side of it, and to an extent the marketing of themselves, most agencies are actually pretty good at that. They can always do better, but they always want to do more. But they're always trying to drive that that top line number by getting more business in at the top, and actually not giving enough attention to actually making the wheels turn really efficiently, really well, and therefore making a real difference on that number at the bottom, because actually that's the most important number really, isn't it? In terms of the money that's left, that is profit that's either sat in the bank or in your bank accounts or whatever, but nevertheless the bit that means that's a viable, successful, profitable, and therefore hopefully growing business as well. Okay? So I may run the danger of actually offending everybody in the room now, but I've got a train of thought here which I'd just like to wander you through for a second. Okay, so I see incompetent people, I see them everywhere. Okay, so hopefully a bit of audience participation here. Who's prepared to give me a very quick hands-up definition of what efficient actually means?
Effective with minimum effort.
Sorry, say again?
Effective with minimum effort.
Effective with minimum effort. Yeah? Any advances on that?
Streamlined and organised.
Yeah, streamlined and organised. Yeah. And is anybody in the room who doesn't want a business that's streamlined and organised and that's effective with minimum effort? Of course not. There isn't, is there? So the dictionary definition, and I particularly like this bit, so performing or functioning in the best possible manner with the least waste of time and effort, having and using requisite knowledge, skill and industry, competent, capable. Sounds pretty good, that, doesn't it? We'll have one of those, won't we, I think, in terms of the way our businesses run and how we run and how we perform, okay? So conversely, anybody have a stab at inefficient? And not efficient isn't a suitable answer. Shambolic, yeah.
Wasteful,
Yeah.
disorganised.
Wasteful, disorganised. Chaotic, did you say chaotic as well, yeah? So again, I think some nice words there, and again, not efficient, which is not a very helpful definition of what inefficient, but nevertheless I think lacking inability, incompetent, and that's my reference point for that. I see incompetent people there because I do see a lot of this out there in the agency world in terms of that not being efficient, not streamlining processes, not being organised, not being disciplined is very, very common out there really in that respect, okay? And what I want to do today is I'll highlight sort of 10 key areas where I see there to be failings and what the issues are there, and hopefully start to talk to each of you about the solution. The irony will be that you'll know what the solutions are. I will not tell you anything tonight that you do not, sadly, I will not tell you anything tonight that you do not already know, but I believe that you will know what, but I'll hopefully help you get to the point of realising why you are not doing it and give you a plan for starting to do some of those things, because each of you will be different in terms of where the emphasis is for you and what the issues are for you and your business, okay? So this is my reference point a little bit around the the boring bit. Yeah? In terms of all these things, all these various areas of management, again, are not necessarily the really exciting core reasons why you started your businesses or started your career or work in the businesses that you do. All really, really important, yeah? But nevertheless, none of them particularly exciting. And neither are things like efficiency, processes, documentation, systems, delivery. I won't read every single word out on the screen. You get the idea now in terms of, the sort of things that we need to talk about and the sort of things you need to grab hold of in your businesses if they are going to be successful ones from an operational point of view and therefore successful ones from a commercial point of view. Okay? Does anybody get excited? Might be a bit of an exaggeration, but cool. Yeah. Okay? Great, absolutely. And I think that point, you make a really valid point there, an interesting point around if you've done it, I don't mean you, if you've been in an environment that hasn't done it well before, and you feel that ultimately that's painful, isn't it? Yeah. Not just from a financial perspective, it's just painful from a process and delivery perspective, and therefore you don't want to keep banging your head against that wall, do you? Yeah, I'll bet. Absolutely. And actually, the thing about the point around client service, clients actually want to know that you've got all this stuff. Because actually, this is all to their benefit, isn't it, as well? Because this should mean that you deliver on time, on spec, and on budget. And again, they want that, don't they? Yeah, it should. Yeah, we all know it's a little bit more complicated, but nevertheless, if you don't do this, you ain't going to do that, are you? So I guess another way of putting what we're going to talk about tonight is this, and again, I guess who really doesn't want this? And there's a great podcast on the, I don't know if anybody listens to The Entrepreneurs. It's part of the, it's dropped out of my mind. I'll remember in a minute and I'll drop it back into the conversation. But nevertheless, on this podcast, which I'll send you a link to, there's an interview with Ajaz Ahmed, who founded at AKQA. And he's talking about why Martin Sorrell, which is all a bit, he's really, really interested now, bearing in mind what's happened last week, but why Martin Sorrell bought his business. And Martin Sorrell bought them because of that. Martin Sorrell bought them because of that. And Ajaz Ahmed actually sold because he thought they could be even better at that as being part of that big global network thing, yeah, and all the learnings that they could get. Because they both saw operational excellence as a real benefit to clients, not just a benefit to the bottom line. So, striving for this and driving for this is a really sort of great place to start and a great thing to be doing, okay? So, Paul briefly introduced me. Part of, I think it's really important just to sort of explain to you why I'm stood here today and my background a little bit, which hopefully gives me a little bit of credibility in terms of what I'm actually saying, okay? So Paul said I've worked in some great agencies, and I worked, when I was in Made by Pi, it was actually called Pilot Interactive, a digital agency in Leeds, which I was there for sort of 10 years in. I've had a couple of stints with McCann's, both in Manchester and Birmingham. I was on the board at McCann. I was a digital director at BJL. I was deputy managing director of 26, and I was managing director of Brand 3, which is a search agency in Leeds for 3 years, through a sale process and through a real evolution from 30 people to 80 people, part of a PLC, corporate, blah, 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 blah. So, and I've worked on I've been lucky enough, I'm an account man by trade, but I've been lucky enough to work on some great brands and some great international pieces of business, etc., with varying pieces of various requirements, if you like, and various sort of deliverables at a sort of product level as well. The learnings from the likes of Brand 3 and McCann in particular, I guess, really, because both were part of networks. McCann was part of IPG, whatever it is, 150,000 employees worldwide and all that sort of stuff, headquartered in New York. So that was a real sort of machine around, we've got to deliver this much money to New York every year. Yeah, Brand 3 was bought by St Ives PLC, so it was part of a group by no means as big. Amazing town, a part of St Ives as well that you may have heard of. But again, the pressure to deliver, and how balancing out that pressure with still delivering quality to clients, still delivering results to clients, and still keeping the people happy, is no mean feat in many respects. There's a real challenge there. But again, I stand by the point that I don't think operational excellence goes against, getting the best out of people. It's not about abusing people, and expecting them to work 10, 12 hours a day, 6, 7 days a week. You can deliver operational excellence and great money by working, with just really sensible and really well, which we'll touch on in a minute. Okay, right. So, firstly, I'd like you to do a little bit of maths, please. Okay. Right. I'll explain the maths, and I'll hand the post. In fact, no. If you just take one and pass one around, if you would. Take one and pass it around. take one and pass it around, and take one and pass it around that way. So this is just for you. So all I want you to do is do these simple maths, okay? So think about either the last 12 months, yeah, or the last financial year. I don't mind whichever's easiest to get into your head, yeah? Has everybody got that? So either the last financial year or the last 12 months, what your revenue has been. So think about your last 12 months in terms of the revenue figure, right? Okay. Then divide that. Then think about how many people you had in your business on average over that period, that 12-month period, yeah, and divide your revenue by your number of people. Okay. You might need your phones, so that's fine. Have I explained? Oh, it's come back, Beth. I don't know what happened. So have I explained myself clearly? So annual revenue, either the last 12 months or your last financial year, divided by roughly the number of people that were in your business over that 12-month period. I know that'll flex a little bit in terms of where you were, but nevertheless, a rough figure. Okay? So has everybody got somewhere with that number? Isn't it? Are we all there? Cool, right, okay. So have you written that on your Post-it notes? Yeah, keep that to yourselves. Don't want to see that, right? Okay, because that's yours. But what I do want you to do is write one of these numbers down. So if your number was between 25,000 and 39,900, write number 1, 1459 number 2, number 3, number 4, and number 5. And if anybody writes a 5 down, they can come here and present, and I'm going to sit down and listen to everything that they've done. Yeah? So please just write one of those numbers on a Post-it note, please. Nothing else, because this is, revenue. Yes, revenue. Yeah. Level of profit is being done. And if you're doing 3, you're still doing pretty well. I still think you're above average, but nevertheless, the clumping of 1s and 2s is very, very, very typical. Very, very, very typical. Okay? So we're going to come back to that. We'll revisit that towards the end. Right, okay. So I've got a hypothesis for you just to start to explain where I'm coming from on this and what I see in this particular world. So designer developer, yeah, they meet at some agency in town, working as both employees, yeah, get on really, really well, yeah, get a bit frustrated after a couple of years with the way it all works, account men like me in the middle of the process doing all the client communication bit and not letting them deal directly with it, being bogged down in you've got to deliver this by this day, etc., etc. I think we can make a go of this ourselves. There's a couple of people that they knew think, actually, we'll give this a go. So they start a business, and actually, they're pretty good. He's a good designer, he's a good developer, and guess what? Within 12 months or so, they've got a team of 6 people, and they're actually, they've got a business. All of a sudden they've got some clients, they've got a nice swanky office in the centre of town, they've all got fancy Macs and all that sort of stuff, and everything that comes with being a great digital business, happy days. However, they're not making any money, okay? They're just absolutely not making any money. So they're paying all their people, of course, their salaries, because you've got to. But actually, when all that's gone, literally, they've got very little in their own pockets to sort of to spend, and they are thinking, what the hell's going on? And there are a number of issues, and this is where the 10 points comes in. Okay, and so there's 10 key things that are driving this poor level of performance. Okay, and again, I'm sure you'll see this and you'll understand this and you'll get the points I'm making. Now, first and foremost, they're a digital business, like I said. Yeah, and the one thing that they are really, really terrible at is they don't appreciate the value of documentation and the importance of documentation. So they don't have a scope. They don't have anything that says, this is what we're delivering for that £20,000 project for that client, this is what we're actually doing. Okay? So recipe for disaster in terms of actually real clarity, both within the business, in terms of what their designers and their developers are actually creating and building, but also recipe for disaster with the client. Because what does the client think he or she is getting for that £20,000? Okay? The other thing they're really, really desperate at is under everything is a small job. Yeah, nothing can take that much time. Oh, the client won't pay that much or whatever. So therefore, that 20 grand job actually really should be a 30 grand job. Yeah, but the client's sort of a bit tight on whatever, and therefore we've just got to do it. So we've underestimated because we just don't think they'll pay that much. And this is very much the context of a designer and a developer worked in an agency, not had client-facing experience, and therefore just doesn't get the context for what things actually cost, even though they could sort that out and work it out for themselves, which we'll come on to in a minute. Okay? The other thing as well is just this overarching, underarching, whatever it is, but fear of having a difficult conversation, fear of saying, actually, it's 30 grand. Yeah, it's not 20, it's 30. And if you can't pay 30, then we'll do something for 20, but it's not that, because that's too big for 30 grand. But the fear of having difficult conversations is very, very, very prevalent. Very prevalent. And I do get this. I can stand here and sort of, preach in some respects in a very sort of purist way. And I do understand completely that it's hard to get clients, isn't it? Clients are hard-won things. Yeah, you might have to pitch, 3 or 4 different agencies. You finally get the nod, yes, you've got it. The last thing you want to do is start to have difficult conversations. Yeah, but nevertheless, you've got to. It's a business. It's a fundamental thing about business. Because guess what? Clients love free shit, and they do, don't they? You give them something for nothing, they will take it. Who won't? Yeah, And again, we're so willing to give time away, and yes, of course we can do that. Yes, we'll just do that. Oh yeah, we'll sort that out. And actually, there's a whole world of pain wrapped up in this sort of space as well, around not being disciplined, around what you are giving. You give your clients what they are paying for in a purest sense, really, in that respect, rather than just allowing things to roll and allowing clients to dictate what it is that you actually deliver and on what terms. And similarly, of course, we're all guilty, but designers can get carried away as well, can't they? And this, again, comes back to the brief thing. And it's a bit of a cliche, forgive me, but this client can afford a Ford Focus. We do not design the Bentley Continental GT for them. Yeah, full stop. We do not do that. But designers, often do want, to do the best possible job. But it's about doing the best possible job within the brief and the budget that this client has got to spend, rather than going for. Because actually, if we do design that for them, it's not the designer's problem to sort it, it's the bloody developers and people like me, and accountants, if you like, who have to try and sort of pick the pieces up from that at the end of the process. So real discipline from a design point of view, in terms of answering the brief and sticking to the brief. Yeah? Developers, again, don't get off lightly either, I don't think. Yeah? Developers have their moments. I'm not a developer by trade. I've worked in digital environments a long time, so I do broadly understand the principle of what goes on there. But my simple reference point for this is developers creating a new contact us form page from scratch every single time you do one. It's like, no, we've done one. We did one for that client 6 months ago. Let's use it and just reskin it, not recreate it, And again, just that overcomplication and complexity, unnecessary overcomplication just adds to a whole world of, especially if you've done it once and it works. Yeah? Whereas let's do it again and have to go through all the testing and everything that comes with it, really, in that respect. Yeah? And I think the other thing around developers, and I mean this, unfortunately, and I don't wish to offend any developer, any real techies in the room. When I was working with McCann Birmingham, I did about 4 years down there. I worked with the best technical director I've ever come across in my life, a guy called Dr. Nick Livingston. He was actually Dr. Livingston. He actually had a T-shirt made with "Read the fucking spec" printed on it, because with some big jobs, that isn't the actual spec, but with some big jobs for Harley Davidson, actually, we did a lot of work for for Harley Davidson globally, where he'd come in, he'd sit down with the developer to get an update, and it was absolutely abundantly clear that that developer did not know what they were building, the detail of what they were actually building and what it had to do. Yeah, well, in this case, that wasn't actually the but even if they hadn't, they should still have asked, shouldn't they? Because it's like, come on, guys, meet, let's come and join halfway. And it is, yeah, yeah. No, I agree. It's a big skill, isn't it? A huge skill. And we'll come on to that in a while. And I think what I'm trying to be is really balanced, because we're all culpable. I think almost whatever your role is, yeah, we've all got to step up and make sure we do our bit. So I'm not just saying developers are the worst culprits. They're not. We're all equally responsible for these things. Yeah. As our project managers, yeah, seeing as we're going through the roles within a sort of digital environment. And again, I've had the pleasure of working with some great ones. I've had the pain of working with some really, really difficult ones, who just seem to have the wrong. They seem to be looking down the telescope from the wrong side. In terms of what the important things are. It's about the team. It's just about the team. My job is to keep the team happy. No, it's not. No, it's not. Your job is to deliver this project and all that sort of stuff. But that, again, it just opens up the proverbial can of worms in many respects in terms of more difficulties and more waste. Yeah, and again, this is not literally me, but I'm responsible on the management side of things. There's a lot of what I've done as sort of senior project owner on various things. Is you don't want to be like David Brent for obvious reasons and all that sort of stuff, because it can have a huge impact on the team, on the motivation. If you need them to stay late, coming over the weekend to do X and Y and Z, you ain't going to do it for David Brent, are they really? As funny as it might be. Yeah, but they're not going to do it for David Brent. And I think the other sort of overarching thing, again, we talked about specs a little bit as well, but if you've got no spec, really you haven't got any process whatsoever. Yeah, and process and milestones and time plans and all that discipline around that is just a scrabbly mess. It's just a complete scrabbly, horrible, time-wasting, energy-sapping mess in every respect, okay? And therefore, the result of that is this thing around operational and financial chaos, okay? And my reference point for financial chaos is this, okay? So hopefully you've all seen a capacity plan in some way, shape or form before, and you've got them in your businesses, okay? I'll explain. This is a really simple one that I use quite a lot, just as a starting point for some of the work that I do in the agency world. So this is in our fictitious, hypothetical 8-man agency, 2 directors, designer, developer, and all that sort of stuff. Yeah. So these are the employee, the 2 directors and the employees. This is the hourly rate they've been charging. Yeah. This is the maximum number of hours per year that could be charged. Yeah. So that's 52 weeks, 6 weeks off for holidays and a bit of sickness, etc., etc. Yeah. Then this is the percentage of that time that's actually chargeable, yeah, and then the rest is maths. So that's that times that gives you this much per person per year, this much per person per month, and then you can see the maths as you drop down here. So this is why they're broke, yeah, because they're making, 1,500 quid a month if they're lucky with 8 people profit after they've done those maths and done that through, okay, which is. It's fairly grim stuff, isn't it? You don't want to be running a business with 8 people in it and turning over that, delivering that sort of net profit and that sort of net profit margin. Okay? Does that make sense?
What kind of margin should?
Oh, let's we do a couple of versions of these. So if let's pick that one up at the end, okay? Because I do a couple of theoretical ones, but yeah, but a lot more than that. A lot more than that, definitely. Okay? So let's just talk a little bit about the sort of potential solution in terms of the way through this. I love an analogy, and I think the analogy is this one really works for me in every respect, in terms of this is just about making the trains run in time. It's not actually a great analogy right now because Northern Rail are absolutely all over the place, but nevertheless, on the whole, yeah. And this is King's Cross, and do a lot of work in London, and therefore that thing around getting from London to Peterborough to Grantham to Newark to Doncaster to Wakefield to Leeds, and you're always there within 1 or 2 minutes of when you should be, on the whole, yeah? And with all this stuff going on, all this infrastructure and trains going the other way, etc., etc., if on the whole it can be done on the East Coast Main Line and on the North West Line and all that sort of stuff, then actually we are in much more control of the moving parts as digital agency people than actually the train people are, and therefore. Yeah, okay. But the other important principle around the trains thing is that, first stop Peterborough in 50 minutes, milestone number 1. That's milestone number 1. In terms, okay, so are we going to get there? And therefore you can track whether you've done that and you can measure that. You set that clearly, okay? I think the other thing is, forgive me for the ladies in the room, but actually this is about actually just growing a pair. Yeah? The point around underestimating and fear, we're absolutely in control of that. So take control. Absolutely take control of you, of your business, of your people, of your time, of your clients. You can say no and all that sort of stuff. So really important that, and we'll come back to that very briefly at the end, because actually that 0.5 on the board there in terms of £100,000 plus, or in terms of that sort of level of revenue per head, is absolutely achievable. And we'll come back and we'll look at what the profit margin would be if we were doing that sort of money. Yeah. But this is, in many respects, in agency world, this is holy grail stuff, but it is absolutely doable. And there's a couple of businesses in the room that are already doing it, so that's really interesting as well in that respect. Okay, so this is very much around driving efficiency. So this is the same capacity plan again. Okay, and all we've changed this time is, whereas this was all 50% last time, we've just got some discipline around how much time for these individuals is actually chargeable. Okay, so the directors have stayed at 50 because that's fair, because they've got businessy stuff to do. They've got to run the business, HR, whatever, legals, accounting, etc. But everybody else is either chargeable at 70 or 80% of their time. Only 80%, that's still Friday off. Yeah, That's still Friday off for everybody in theory, yeah? But look at the difference it makes. You know, from 4.8%, I think, and 1,800 quid, all of a sudden we're making 13 grand a month and 160 grand in the year. No more people, no more overhead costs. All it is just by being much more efficient in terms of the amount of time that people are chargeable for.
Why couldn't you direct design at the same price as your employees?
We'll come back to that. You're way ahead of me, but that's because why you're a number 5, I'm sure, but nevertheless. So yeah, so that's the point there, but we will come back to that, absolutely. Then the other thing around documentation is, so part of the solution, so first and foremost, documentation, and I think you said it, yeah? Firstly, this is a really, really, really important piece of work, yeah? And shouldn't be just given away, and shouldn't be just said, yes, we'll do that. You charge for it. You know, requirements definition, by definition, you know, is fundamentally important to what actually ends up being delivered. And there's a skill in actually going through that process and getting to that point of having that document together. So absolutely do it, but absolutely charge for it as well. And also, really, really importantly, get it approved by the client. Yeah, then you know what you're building and they know what you are building for them. And this money and all sorts of stuff is wrapped up in there as well, and they also know what they're paying for it. Okay? So really, really sort of fundamental points there in that respect. And then in terms of estimate, there's some real, some real discipline needed around the whole estimating thing. So again, nicked from a previous place, and you can't read the detail and you don't need to, but nevertheless, you can start to get a feel for the level of detail with it. You can probably just about you see the word documentation there as well, yeah? In terms of, so that's documentation, design, wireframing, can't remember, whatever, build, testing, all that sort of stuff, project management, but it's all detailed and laid out, and therefore you're really, really clear about what's involved in each of the stages, how much time, the roles of the people doing it, day rates, and then totals, etc., etc. Now that doesn't have to go to the client, of course, yeah, in terms of that level of detail, and I'd encourage you not to send it to the client, because the hourly rates and the amount of time, the day rates and the amount of time that people are spending on it is not really their concern. The bottom bit is, yeah, and even the totals here arguably are and can be, so they can see there's some level of diligence around how you're breaking things down, but the amount of time is not for a client to because then also, well, actually, do we really need 10 days of design? And how many clients are genuinely qualified to ask that question? They're just not, are they really? But the important thing is for internal use is there's a really clear definition of the amount of time by department, by person that's going to be required on a particular project, okay? And then the other thing, to your point, around day rates, is charge. So the thing about charge properly is clients commission you because of your expertise, so don't be afraid to charge for it. You know, if you've won a pitch especially, that's because you were the best people for that job in the client's view. And therefore they have to be prepared to pay the going rate for what it is you are doing for them. So how you want to break your cost down really is entirely up to you, but there are some really nice benchmarks, and Paul and David and the guys at MAP can really help you on this. But you know, the old world is a third. You know, third of salaries, third for overhead, and third for profit. There's actually even more movement now towards 40, 20, 40 if you're charging really, really well and really profitably for your time. Okay? And again, who doesn't want to make 40% for themselves? And why shouldn't you? And all that sort of stuff. Okay? The other thing then, so I'll just get a quick drink of water, a bit dry, is so we did the estimate a couple of slides ago, and this will say, well, okay, there's this much time for this designer, this UX, this UI, this development, testing, etc., etc. But once you've got that, you can start to plot that time against the resource. So effectively, you are managing the business, and there's loads. It doesn't have to be a team week, but there's loads of software out there that can help you to run your businesses and help you to run projects. Yeah, and you've probably all got favourites, and we can gladly talk about that in a minute, because it's funny, if it's a question that Paul gets asked quite frequently, is what's the best pieces, project management software out there, etc., etc. But never, it's the principle of using software, having a plan, knowing who in your business is working on what and when, and that work will be done by the time you've committed to your clients by, is a really, really fundamentally important thing as well. Okay, and then if you've got that, of course, then you can create a timing plan, and clients will always want a timing plan. Yeah, will always want a timing plan, and therefore making sure they've got clear milestones and they know what's going on by, not necessarily by who, but they certainly know what's going on and when. The other important thing about timing plans is clients know when they have got to do their bits by. Yeah, in the old world of advertising that I was part of back in the day, all clients really had to do was say yes or no. Yeah, it's not like that in the digital world now. A lot of projects clients need to provide content. Some clients even actually are doing the content population, so they've actually got a really important piece of work to do. So letting them know what they need to do by when and how much time they've got to do it, and they're committing to that, is really important part of this. Because actually, what often happens is clients don't do their bit in time, but the deadline never moves, and then things just get squeezed and truncated, and therefore the pressure to sort of deliver on a shorter time scale than you thought really does sort of start to come to bear. And we'll come back to that in a second as well. The other thing I find, and particularly on larger projects, is you know the thing about the 100 metres, you go on the B of bang. Yeah, so this point around, if you start, you know, once you're starting on a project, you are starting on it. It doesn't take a week, you know, to get everything set up and to understand the brief. You get on with it, you get in with it, get on with the project to start to deliver certain milestones. And another thing I used to like to do on some of the larger pieces of work that I've been responsible for is set a really early deadline for everybody on something, yeah, just to make sure that actually we're off, we're running, we've started. We're not just thinking I've got 6 weeks to do this. It's not important right now. And I don't think that was me. And then conversely, you know, great project managers are worth their weight in gold. They absolutely are, because they're focused on the project, they're focused on the documentation, the estimate, the timing plan, and the deliverables, and everybody in the team doing their bit to deliver against that, if you like, that spec and that quote. So, like I said, I've worked with some awful ones, I've worked with some great ones as well, who really, really do add to the process and add genuine value into the business, both at a from a client point of view and from an agency point of view as well. And similarly great man managers. You probably don't know, that's Ernie Shackleton, really famous 8 years ago, something like that. Google him, fantastic story, great film as well with Kenneth Branagh in when he plays Shackleton. But basically what the story is, they get stuck in the ice floe in the Antarctic, they're going to be stuck there for 6 months, running out of supplies, and Shackleton kept all his men together, led half of them to climb over South Georgia Island, whatever it was, to some level of civilization, and then brought people back to rescue them and feed them and all that stuff. But there was no descent, and it was a real classic example of real great leadership, you know, of taking control, of showing that it was in control, but without alienating, without being authoritarian or dictatorial, etc., etc. It's a really great example, really great example. So Google Ernie Shackleton when you've got 2 minutes spare at the weekend, okay? And then if you want to do Abraham Lincoln, do that as well. But Lincoln came with a great quote about you cannot escape the responsibility tomorrow by evading it today. So there's a little bit of that is around start now and get going. But the other thing is, and this is something I feel really, really strongly about, and there's a little bit of millennials, the millennial generation kicking through in some of this point here, is that actually there is not necessarily a correlation between getting paid so much money and doing so much work. And that is, and don't forget, this is only 95 or 80% of working weeks. This isn't out of hours, weekends or whatever, but you've got a job to do. This is it. And as long as it's clearly defined, you've got to do this by Friday, and those expectations aren't unreasonable, then they've got to do it by Friday. So there's a lot in there around making sure that the people who are responsible to delivering the various facets of a project clearly understand what they need to deliver and when they need to deliver it by, and understand that it's not an option. Say, sorry, I haven't quite finished it, I'll finish it on Tuesday. So everybody's got to take responsibility for their part of a project. And especially on the larger ones, because guess what, it can unravel very, very easily and very, very quickly. And then as far as clients are concerned, I mean, this is easy, just don't do it. You know, and certainly don't do it the first time you're asked. There can be strategic times when you think, actually, we'll sort that out. Yeah. But it's the exception, not the rule, because as soon as you open the floodgates, they're expected to be open all the time, and clients don't forget this sort of stuff. And of course, they'll take it if they're given it. So absolutely clamp down on it. And the other thing is, never ever, as much as you possibly can, don't scrimp on the testing bit. You know, this point I made earlier about clients can often be quite late coming back or not deliver what they're supposed to deliver, but the deadline never changes. And it's the testing that always gets squeezed, isn't it? By definition, because you can't test until everything else is in and finished. But if your deadline hasn't moved, it's the old world of print. For those of you who are old enough, if you're anybody, to remember that. It was the printer that always got squeezed in the old world, because the artwork was always late, but they still only had 3 days to turn it around. But this is a genuine false economy. And I've been there where you'd have to push a site live on Monday because that was the deadline, and then you spend the next 3 weeks fixing bugs. You know, because constantly, there's somebody, the client's spotting something else, because you haven't had the time to test it properly that you wanted, and you've just had to compromise, and that unravels, and that's where your recovery rates really start to slip and really start to fail.
You never want to pay for testing either.
Pardon?
Clients never want to pay for testing.
No, yeah.
That's crazy because you're paying for quality.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's just a quality sale.
Well, you could. It's a brave thing to do, isn't it? But you can say, well, actually, okay, well, if you're not paying for testing, we won't test it. But again, it's always you've got to fix it in the end anyway. So, but nevertheless, I'm hoping that there are more over time we get more and more informed and enlightened clients and realise the importance of things like this as well. Because you're right, it's like clients don't like to pay for project management.
Yeah.
It's like really. So anyway, that's another topic altogether in many respects. Okay. The other thing I'm a big fan of and quite passionate about is making sure that processes are clearly defined and standardised. Yeah, it's a bit like franchising really in that respect. You know, McDonald's, whether you like the food or not, but you get exactly the same thing whichever McDonald's you go to, but they're all franchises. Yeah, and that's because everything is so clearly defined and locked down in terms of what needs to be done by when and by whom to turn out that Big Mac or whatever it is. Now, this isn't, 30-page process documents that nobody will ever read. This is double-sided, maximum, bullet points. This is the design process. We don't start design without a brief. We don't push design into development without approval from the client. That sort of stuff, some headlines, but really, really clear. And if you say we don't start design without a brief, this is the creative brief template that we use. And lots of templates there. So just enforcing some of that really good stuff, is incredibly useful and incredibly helpful. Yeah. And then the other thing is, things that need to be done, things that need to be changed, you will not change overnight, and will not start on Monday morning by being a great business and we'll having loads of fives on the board. So create a scorecard so you can start to see progress and you can monitor progress and you can set yourself some levels to get to over time, which we'll come back to. So things around client satisfaction. I don't know if anybody uses Net Promoter Scores, but really great tool for simple client satisfaction measures. And you can also do it with employees as well. There's employee Net Promoter Score metric in the mix there as well. But then some financial ones around wages as a proportion of revenue per head, which is such a, which I'm a big fan of, as you've gathered as well. But any others in the mix there that you want to know. And again, if you're trying to build more retained client business rather than project-based business, then again, retain as a percentage of overall revenue is a really good metric to sort of monitor against. But create a scorecard, 5 or 6 key metrics at the most, so you can monitor progress on a monthly basis. Yeah, and use as much technology as you can to help. There's loads out there, and I'm sure that most of you do because you're naturally in that space anyway. But Zero, I know the map guys are big fans of Zero, as am I. But there's loads of other stuff out there that you can use to help you deliver. Okay. So I guess the real thing, if this was headlined as the 3 Ds of operational excellence, what are the 3 Ds really in management? And I'm going to disappoint you all now by saying it's discipline, discipline, and more discipline. But the reference point for that is discipline for you guys as senior people in your businesses and business owners, discipline to realise that you are running a business, yeah, and your business is on the whole based around the use of your people's time. Yeah. The second discipline is about, forgive me, I thought they were all there. That's my fault. I didn't realize I put a build on there. I apologise. The second discipline is around the people within your business. Okay, so we've got the really clearly defined processes, and everybody understands what those processes are. Then they have to follow those processes, and they have to deliver by Friday. Yeah, 9 times out of 10, there'll always be exceptions when something's not quite right or something's a bit more complicated. But nevertheless, the exception, not the rule. So discipline around your people, but then lastly, discipline around your clients. Yeah, and what you are giving for them and what you've agreed to them. Control them. Funny if I was with one of my agency clients in Leeds this morning who had an issue with a client who was starting to take the piss a little bit, but they just stood up for it. They just said, no, I'm sorry. And literally they had a conversation directly with the chief exec, which always helps in fairness because chief execs are business people and therefore understand business arguments. But they just basically expect, we can't do this. We haven't allowed for it. It wasn't originally in the scope, so it's not in the budget. It's never been mentioned before. We will do it, but it's another, I don't know what the number was, $5,000. And the client accepted it. But and also the client now respect them for that level of control and that level of discipline they've got around their business and their time. Okay? So you sort of said what's an acceptable level of sort of net profit. I actually think that that this is actually really achievable. Yeah. So we're back in that same place with this 8-man business, 2 directors, 6 employees. Yeah, and what we've done now is we've just started to charge people properly. Okay, and actually £100 an hour is not a high rate. It's not a high rate for senior agency people. It is not. It's a very average rate for senior people. But all of a sudden, just by charging more for people, this is the same one that we saw last time, where it was where that figure was 160 grand. All of a sudden, you know, we're making phenomenal levels of profit, you know, with nothing else but changing other than this level of discipline and control within the business. Okay? Now, again, there's some big numbers in here, and a couple of these people have hit the 100 grand a year plus level, but nevertheless, the rest of them are all really, really achievable. So, you know, 47.6% is a great result, but I actually think any agency, and David, I don't know what your view is, but I think the 30, you know, if you start to hit the 30% mark, 25-30%, you are doing very, very well, and you'll certainly be outperforming the agency market from what I see anyway. Do you agree, David? Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So, what we thought would be really useful, hopefully will be useful, is a little bit of, and this is for you guys, so you're not sharing anything. I'll just reiterate that again because it's useful to reflect on what we've been through for the last sort of 3/4 of an hour or so. Do you want another one, Matt? Do you want to do it again? Okay. Oh, you do want to do one? Okay. In fact, would you mind taking one and passing the rest on? So, so what I'd like you to do is when you get your sheet, just spend a couple of minutes. So firstly, think about how you believe you currently score out of 10, yeah, for each of the areas that we've spoken about, yeah? Then in the next column, once you've done that, is write a 3-month target score. So they actually think, well, actually, I really need to concentrate on that particular area. If it's currently a 6, I want to get it to an 8, yeah, and do that. And then the last bit is highlight 1, 2, 3 in the column on the right, yeah, which are those top 3 priorities, because I think we've got to be really careful to make sure that you can hopefully take something actionable away, but that's something to prioritise, because if you've got all 10 to work on, it's probably a bit too much. Okay, so we'll just do that for a minute or two first. So current score, 3-month target, and then your top 3 priorities. You're not sharing this, by the way, so don't worry, because I appreciate this is quite sensitive and quite personal to you and your businesses, but it's just for your consumption. So we'll do those first couple of things first, please. Have you done? Everybody done that? I'll take them off you then. If I'm not looking, doesn't matter. Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you.
You got any post-its?
Thank you. 100. Tap. Thank you. Tap. Thank you. Yeah. Cool.
The new one.
Yeah. Okay. There's another one there. Sorry, Mister. I think Andrew's probably done one as well. Right, okay, so we'll just come back to that in a second, but really hopefully what it'll show is the balance of those in a slightly different place, okay, because everybody's hopefully moved down 1 or 2 levels or whatever, but just have some level of ambition, okay. But please keep your sheets, and the other important thing about, there's loads of psychology around writing stuff down, and how by writing things down, even rather than typing things, but if you write something down, you are committing yourself mentally to doing something and to take action and responding to it. So hopefully by scoring yourselves and doing the 1, 2, 3s and putting some targets in place for what you want to do over the next 3 months, over 12 months, we'll set you on we'll start the journey for you in terms of starting to deliver against it. Okay, so you'll be glad to know I've finished talking now, but I'd like to open up the floor to questions. I know we had a few on the way through, which was great. Thank you very much for that. But has anybody else anything they wanted to say? Questions, observations, comments on thanks, David. What's going particularly well now, for example, as well? Anybody got anything to say?